There are few things more ironic in life than being turned away from something you helped create. Fewer still when it happens with a polite smile, a corporate pamphlet, and a complimentary keychain shaped like the very car you weren't allowed to drive. It was a sunny Tuesday morning in Paso Robles, a sleepy town nestled between California vineyards and espresso stands, where people still waved at each other through windshields and dogs napped outside hardware stores. Nobody expected a billionaire to stroll in unannounced, especially not that billionaire. Elon Musk had a plan that morning: keep things simple, anonymous, and mildly entertaining. Wearing a faded gray hoodie, worn-out jeans, and aviator sunglasses that looked like they belonged to a 1970s motorcycle cop, Elon stepped out of a rented Honda Civic, parked it a little crooked in the Tesla dealership lot, and pulled his cap lower over his face. He wasn't in a bad mood. On the contrary, he was curious. How did the average customer experience Tesla these days? He wanted the full treatment. No red carpet, no nervous sales pitch from someone who'd Googled his net worth 10 minutes before the meeting. He wanted to be nobody. And for the first 5 minutes, he got exactly that. "Good morning," chirped a sharply dressed man standing just inside the Tesla showroom doors. His name tag read Chad, lead sales consultant, and his smile had the polish of someone who practiced in the mirror. "Welcome to Tesla Paso Robles. Looking for anything in particular today?" Elon, still half shielded by his sunglasses, gave a modest shrug. "Just wanted to see the new Model S. Maybe take it for a spin." Chad's eyes scanned him up and down twice. The hoodie, the scuffed sneakers, the faint smell of road trip. He hesitated just long enough for it to sting. "Test drives," Chad began with the patient tone of a kindergarten teacher explaining how scissors work, "are typically reserved for pre-qualified buyers. It's company policy." Elon raised an eyebrow. "Pre-qualified?" Chad gestured to a nearby digital kiosk. "Yes. We just ask that customers first complete a brief form, proof of income, valid license, a soft credit check. Nothing invasive. It's just how we ensure, well, you understand." He didn't say people like you, but he didn't have to. Elon glanced around the showroom. A Model X sat under soft lighting like a spaceship in a museum. A young couple admired a white Model 3 while sipping kombucha. Nobody recognized him. Not yet. He stepped toward the kiosk. "Actually," Chad cut in, subtly shifting to block his path, "even with the form, we reserve test drives for serious buyers. I'm sure you're just curious, but these cars aren't toys, you know?" Now that made Elon smile. "I know a little something about how they're built," he said, voice warm with quiet mischief. Chad laughed politely. "I'm sure you've read all the brochures. Everyone's excited about EVs these days." Behind Elon, the automatic door whooshed as another customer entered. Chad's attention shifted immediately. "If you'll excuse me, I just need to greet." But Elon was already turning away, suppressing the urge to reveal himself. There was no point. He could have dropped the name, could have pulled out his phone, and summoned the full force of corporate PR. But where's the fun in that? Instead, he walked slowly past the rows of Teslas, hands in his pockets, nodding at a teenage employee vacuuming a floor mat. Out in the parking lot, the sun was warmer than he remembered. The Civic's door creaked when he opened it, which made him laugh softly. He reached for the keys but paused. From the corner of his eye, he saw someone, an older man in cargo shorts, getting ushered toward a red Model Y by the same Chad, now all smiles and hand gestures. That guy got the test drive. The irony practically wrote itself. Elon leaned back in the car's seat, tilted his head against the headrest, and stared up through the windshield at the bright California sky. How many others had been dismissed like that? Not just at Tesla, but everywhere. People judged by the shoes they wore, the way they spoke, the car they drove to see a better car. He wasn't offended, he was intrigued. The moment, as ridiculous as it was, had revealed something deeper than he expected. That's when a teenage girl passed by on a skateboard, stopped mid-ride, squinted at him, and asked, "Hey, you look kind of like that SpaceX guy." Elon smiled again. "I get that a lot." She didn't believe him, but didn't care enough to push it. She kicked off and rolled away, earbuds blasting something that sounded like synth pop over cowbells. The incident might have ended there, with Elon driving off to get a burrito and a laugh, but the universe had other plans. Inside the dealership, security cameras had been rolling. And later that afternoon, someone in the back office found the footage amusing enough to share it in a private group chat labeled Tesla LOLs. Within hours, it had been screen recorded, clipped, and posted anonymously on Reddit under the title, "This dude tried to test drive a Tesla. Got denied hard. LMAO." The comments poured in. "He looks like Elon Musk's weird cousin. Dude really thought they'd let him in with a hoodie like that. Why does this guy know so much about battery architecture though?" Faced with tears of joy, Elon hadn't even seen the clip yet. He was still enjoying a late breakfast, reading a book about ancient maritime navigation techniques, and sipping coffee at a roadside diner. He had no idea his brief encounter with Chad was about to go viral. But soon, everyone else would. And when the truth finally surfaced, it wouldn't just be Chad who had some explaining to do. Chad cleared his throat. Not dramatically, but with the kind of subtle professionalism that implied he had just about reached his limit of patience. "You know," he said with a practiced smile and a sideways glance, "this model isn't for everyone." Elon, still standing by the glossy black Model S with his hands tucked loosely in his hoodie, tilted his head slightly. "Is that so?" Chad nodded, gesturing toward the luxury EV like it were an exotic animal at a zoo exhibit. "This car is a statement piece. Performance, elegance, precision. We usually cater to clients who," he paused, searching for a phrase that sounded less judgmental than it was, "fit the profile." "The profile," Elon repeated, raising an eyebrow behind his sunglasses. "And what's that?" Chad chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it. "You know, entrepreneurs, investors, doctors, people who value performance and aesthetics. People who understand what this kind of machine represents." Elon took a step back and nodded slowly, as if absorbing a complex philosophy. "So, what do I represent?" Another pause. A hesitation. Chad knew he was entering dangerous territory, but the salesman reflex was stronger than common sense. "Honestly," he lowered his voice slightly, "you look like someone who wandered in from a truck stop. No offense." "None taken," Elon replied, amused. Chad motioned to the kiosk again. "Listen, if you're serious, you can fill out the pre-screening. But these cars aren't really test-driven for fun, you know? They're not like Mustangs." That one landed. Elon smirked. "Right, of course." He let the silence hang for a moment, long enough to make Chad uncomfortable. In truth, Elon wasn't angry, not even insulted. He was fascinated, like a scientist watching a lab mouse run the wrong way through a maze. There was something pure about it, unfiltered, and painfully revealing. He shifted his attention back to the Model S, pretending to examine the door handles. "What kind of range are you getting these days?" he asked casually. Chad blinked. "Excuse me." "Range," Elon repeated. "I heard the new software update tweaked the algorithm. Less aggressive on acceleration curves, more efficient on long hauls." There was a beat of silence. Chad scrambled for words. Yes. Some improvement with the recent, firmware. I think." Elon smiled without showing teeth. "You think?" Chad cleared his throat again. Behind them, a family was taking pictures in front of a cherry red Model Y. A boy pointed to the dealership window and shouted, "Hey, it's that new Cybertruck." Elon turned to look, more to buy Chad some time than anything else. He'd been in meetings where engineers dissected algorithms that governed autopilot decisions on icy roads. He'd approved battery architecture and fought over nanometers in chipsets. And here he was being told he wasn't the type. The irony was so perfect it might have been scripted. He let the moment drift a little longer before glancing back at Chad. "So let me get this straight. I walked in here asking about a Tesla, showed interest in a test drive, asked a few decent questions, and got told I don't fit the brand?" Chad looked trapped. "It's not personal. It's just policy." Elon leaned in just slightly, lowering his voice. "You sure it's not perspective?" A flicker of confusion passed through Chad's eyes. He looked away. Inside the dealership, a young woman with curly black hair and a maroon name badge was watching from behind a row of monitors. Her name tag read Ruby, Energy Advisor. Her expression was harder to read, somewhere between curiosity and quiet irritation. Meanwhile, Elon decided to press the advantage, mostly for his own amusement. "So what if I told you," he began, "that I've driven more Teslas than you've sold?" Chad's shoulders tensed. "I'd say that's a bold claim. And if I told you I helped design this very model?" Chad scoffed. "Sir, I don't know what game you're playing, but we're not." The automatic doors whooshed again as another customer entered, and Chad's attention shifted like a weather vane in the wind. "Excuse me," he muttered, stepping away, grateful for the escape. Elon stayed where he was, running a finger lightly along the sleek curve of the Model S's hood. The paint was perfect, almost too perfect. He remembered obsessing over pigment tone for the exact level of depth in sunlight. He remembered arguing that the flush door handles needed to pop faster in winter temperatures. And now, he wasn't even allowed to sit inside. He almost laughed. That's when Ruby approached, gently, cautiously, like someone approaching a wild animal others had deemed dangerous. "Hey," she said. "Sorry about earlier." Chad. Elon turned toward her. "He certainly is." She offered a polite smile. "You asked about the software update. You were right. It adjusted torque curves and improved range by 6% in city cycles. I've only seen 2 customers mention it. One of them was an aerospace engineer." Elon tilted his head. "And the other?" "You," she said. He laughed softly. "You caught that, huh?" "I also caught the way you looked at the car," Ruby added. "Not like a buyer, more like a builder." There was a long pause. Elon took off his sunglasses finally. Ruby's eyes widened only slightly. She didn't gasp. She didn't scream. She didn't bow or fumble for a selfie. She just blinked, nodded slowly, and said, "I thought I recognized that voice." Elon gave a half shrug. "Guess I don't fit the profile." Ruby glanced over her shoulder, where Chad was now animatedly gesturing at an iPad with a new couple. "His loss," she murmured. "Want to come back tomorrow? I open early. We could talk cars off the record." Elon looked at her, genuinely surprised by the offer. Then he smiled. "I'd like that," he said. He walked out of the dealership once again, the same Civic waiting like a loyal dog. But this time, he wasn't shaking his head in disbelief. This time, he was smiling, because he knew this story was only getting started. The surveillance footage wasn't even meant to be reviewed that day. It was 4:17 p.m. and Kevin, an overworked intern with a degree in marketing and a passion for crypto, was halfway through organizing digital inventory sheets when the system froze. Standard protocol said to reboot the POS terminal. Kevin, however, being both impatient and nosy, decided to poke around in the security feed while the system restarted. The Tesla dealership's main camera was set at a polite, unobtrusive angle, just high enough to catch interactions without feeling intrusive. As the screen flickered back to life, Kevin caught sight of something that made him squint. There it was, a moment frozen in accidental comedy. A man in a gray hoodie, hands in his pockets, sunglasses resting low on his nose, stood beside a black Model S, receiving what could only be described as a firm corporate dismissal from Chad. The contrast in body language was cinematic. Chad with arms confidently gesturing, clearly in "this car isn't for you" mode, and the hoodie man tilted slightly, absorbing the rejection with a mixture of curiosity and mild entertainment. Kevin chuckled to himself, clicked export clip, and trimmed the video to 24 seconds. He added some light zoom on Chad's face, a freeze frame at the exact second Elon turned away, and finally a caption in bold white text. "When you try to test drive a Tesla but look like you sleep in your car." Satisfied, he sent it to the dealership's group chat under the title, "Rough Sales Day." Within 2 minutes, someone in the group, probably Anthony from back office, uploaded it anonymously to Reddit with the post. "Some old dude tried to test drive a Model S today. Got humbled real fast. Face with tears of joy. They didn't know, of course. None of them did. To them, He was just some guy in a beat-up Civic with a weirdly intense way of talking about battery software. But Reddit knew how to feast on a clip like that. By 7 p.m., the post had over 12,000 upvotes. A Twitter user reposted it with the caption, "Elon Musk's cousin trying to get a discount skull." TikTok creators stitched it with over-the-top commentary, slow zooms, dramatic music, clips of people screaming "new," and even someone editing in subtitles like, "Chad, you look poor. Elon laughs in trillionaire." And yet, no one had pieced it together. The sunglasses, the cap, the hoodie, they were just enough to disguise the most recognizable entrepreneur on Earth. It was like Superman and his glasses, only Elon didn't need a cape. Just an old Civic and a deadpan expression. Somewhere around midnight, the clip landed in a group chat with a few SpaceX engineers. One of them, a junior propulsion specialist named Rishi, squinted and said, "Wait, that kind of looks like the boss." His friends laughed. No way. Elon doesn't drive Civics. That guy looks like he just escaped from a coding boot camp. Still, Rishi couldn't shake the feeling. He opened the clip in slow motion, watching the way the man's lips moved, the slight nod, the hands tucked into his hoodie in that familiar, introspective way. But by then, the internet had taken control of the narrative. One Twitter user rebranded the man as Grumpy Grandpa Gearhead. Another turned it into a parody ad, Tesla. Not for the weak, not for the weird, definitely not for you. The memes multiplied. Older adult, can I test drive? Briefcase, you got $100,000, old man? Older adult, I own the company. Briefcase, sure you do. Even Instagram accounts for luxury car lovers joined in. A reel showed the clip with trap music, overlays of dollar bills, and Chad's face circled in red like a reality show villain. What nobody realized was that Elon was completely unaware of all of it. At that exact moment, he was sitting on a rooftop patio, sipping Mexican Coke from a glass bottle, and watching the Paso Robles skyline glow amber. The air smelled like lavender and exhaust fumes. His Civic, still dusty from a highway, was parked nearby under a streetlight. He was scrolling through design sketches for a Mars habitat prototype, completely unplugged from the storm brewing online. It wasn't until Ruby messaged him the next morning, one simple sentence, that he caught wind of it. "Did you see what they did to you?" Elon frowned, thumb hovering over the reply button. "What do you mean?" She sent the link. He clicked. The video loaded, and there it was. Him, standing awkwardly in front of the Model S, Chad, dismissive. His sunglasses catching the overhead lights just enough to obscure the eyes. And the caption, "Old dude tries and fails. Tesla ain't for everyone." Elon watched it twice, then a third time. He wasn't offended, not even close. He was amused. And more than that, he was fascinated. In 24 seconds, the world had turned a quiet Tuesday into a global roast. They had memed him, mocked him, and reinvented his identity, and yet not one of them had looked close enough to notice the truth. He chuckled, leaned back, and texted Ruby, "Let's make this fun." The next morning, the dealership buzzed with a different kind of energy. Phones rang more often. People whispered near the water cooler. Chad, once the self-proclaimed prince of Tesla Paso Robles, walked with a little less swagger. Something had shifted, and while no one said out loud, everyone had seen the meme. It had reached local news. A grainy security still of Chad mid-gesture next to a man in a hoodie. The headline? Tesla salesman rejects test drive, accidentally roasts Elon Musk. No confirmation, of course. No official statement. But the speculation was like wildfire in a dry canyon, hot, fast, and impossible to stop. Meanwhile, in the corner of the dealership, seated behind a minimalist gray desk topped with a ceramic cup of chamomile tea and a small succulent, sat Ruby Alvarez. Ruby had been with Tesla for 3 years, not long enough to be jaded, but long enough to see how people treated others when they didn't think it mattered. She watched the drama unfold the day before from a respectful distance, sipping her tea and observing the silent mechanics of arrogance. She'd seen Elon before, not in person, but in videos, interviews, even the odd tweet that made her laugh or cringe, depending on the day. When she'd spotted him beside the Model S, there was a flicker of recognition. The voice, the way he stood, the thoughtful pauses before responding. But what truly caught her attention wasn't who he might be. It was the way Chad dismissed him like an afterthought. Ruby hated that. The assumption that someone's worth could be calculated based on their shoes, their shirt, the wear on their car keys. She had grown up watching her mother, a school janitor, get ignored by principals who couldn't remember her name. Her father, a mechanic, once offered a free fix to a man who didn't even say thank you. Ruby learned early that empathy was a form of resistance and kindness was a kind of power. So after Elon walked out with that little half smile still tugging at his lips, Ruby had quietly pulled his visitor entry from the logbook and noted the time. She didn't plan to stalk him. Just be ready. And now, 24 hours later, she saw him again. Same hoodie, same sunglasses, same crooked parking job in that dusty Civic. But this time, Elon didn't walk straight in. He paused at the door, looked through the glass, and met Ruby's eyes. She smiled first. Chad was busy with a customer, pitching a Model Y like it was handcrafted by archangels. He didn't even notice. Ruby rose from her chair, brushed a curl from her face, and walked to the entrance just as Elon opened the door. "Back for more abuse?" she asked, tone playful. Elon grinned, couldn't resist. "I heard the service here is uncompromising." She laughed. It was genuine, not out of politeness, but surprise. The man could have walked in swinging lawsuits or cameras or publicists. But instead, he brought curiosity and a mischievous twinkle in his eye. Ruby motioned to the coffee station. "Can I offer you a cup of overpriced eco-friendly coffee?" "Only if it's as bitter as yesterday's rejection," he replied. They sat on a small sofa near the windows. Customers came and went. Chad strutted through the showroom, still unaware that the supposed nobody had returned. Ruby poured coffee, and Elon sipped it like it was a rare whiskey. "You knew yesterday, didn't you?" he asked quietly. Ruby raised an eyebrow. "Knew what?" "Who I was." She tilted her head. "Not at first, but I pay attention. You asked the kind of questions no casual shopper asks. And you stood there like someone used to hearing no, but not used to accepting it." Elon nodded slowly. "You didn't say anything. I wanted to see what you'd do." He laughed. "So did I." Ruby leaned back, cradling her cup. "What brings you to Paso Robles? Thought you'd be test driving rockets, not Teslas." "I wanted to see how people are treated when no one's watching." Ruby nodded, then grew quiet. There was a warmth between them, not romantic, not yet, but grounded. Like two people who spoke the same language in a world that often preferred noise. After a pause, Elon asked, "Do you like working here?" Ruby didn't answer immediately. She looked around the room, the cars, the screens, the modern efficiency. "I love Tesla," she said. "What it represents, what it could be. But sometimes I think we lose track of the why. Too many policies, too many Chads." "Too many Chads," Elon repeated with a grin. "That should be on a shirt." "I'd wear it," she replied. Then, as if the universe needed comic relief, Chad finally noticed Elon. He froze mid-stride. Ruby saw the color drain from his face, the dawning horror of meme meets reality. Chad's jaw dropped open, just slightly. Elon looked up, waved two fingers in a lazy salute, and said, "Hey, Chad." Chad blinked, nodded stiffly, and turned like a malfunctioning Roomba, walking in a direction that didn't lead anywhere in particular. Ruby sipped her tea. "I should probably go comfort him." "Nah," Elon said. "Let him marinate." They both laughed, and for a moment it was just that, two people in the middle of a dealership, laughing over coffee and unexpected honesty. Ruby looked at him thoughtfully. "So what now?" Elon stood, pulled out his phone, and showed her a headline. The meme, the guesses, the chaos. "I think," he said, "it's time to have some fun with it." Ruby smiled, a spark behind her eyes. "I'm in," she said. Ruby didn't sleep much that night. She told herself it was because of the wind, or the neighbor's barking dog, or the cold tea she drank too late. But the truth sat quietly in her chest, she couldn't stop thinking about Elon Musk sitting across from her in a dealership break area, sipping coffee like it was a therapy session. There was something electric in that silence they shared. Not the sparks of attraction, at least not yet, but something subtler. Like she'd stumbled into a conversation that had started long before she was born and might stretch long after she was gone. By 7:30 a.m., she was back at her desk, 30 minutes early, humming a little tune under her breath. She'd worn her best version of casual. Black slacks, the maroon Tesla polo shirt with the collar ironed just right, and a thin silver bracelet her mother had given her when she landed the job. It was her quiet reminder that no job was just a job. The dealership was still mostly empty, just the soft hiss of the automatic doors and the faint hum of charging stations outside. Chad wouldn't roll in for another hour. Ruby was fine with that. At exactly 7:47 a.m., the Civic pulled in. Same crooked angle, same dusty sheen. But this time, Elon parked slower, more deliberately, like someone accepting an inside joke with the universe. He stepped out, pulled his hoodie down, and gave her a mock-serious nod through the glass. She met him at the door before he could reach the handle. "Mr. Musk," she said with a smirk. "Ms. Alvarez," he replied just as formally. "I assume you've returned to file a class-action lawsuit against all salesmen named Chad. Only the ones with Bluetooth headsets permanently attached." They both laughed, and Ruby motioned him inside. The dealership was still quiet, which made it feel less like a showroom and more like a place of confession. She led him past the reception area and toward a car on display, a pearl white Model S Plaid, shining under soft halogen spotlights like a freshly waxed moon. The floor-to-ceiling windows behind it cast long morning shadows across the floor. "No test drives today," she said, "but I thought you might want a closer look." Elon raised an eyebrow. "And here I thought I wasn't the target demographic." She grinned. "Well, you did score points for persistence. And you brought your own car this time, which is at least worth a cup of coffee." She handed him a paper cup, black, compostable, no logo. It smelled faintly of cinnamon and almond milk. "Fancy," Elon murmured, taking a sip. They stood in front of the car for a moment, sipping quietly. Ruby broke the silence. "I've always thought this one looks like it wants to be in motion, even when it's parked. You know what I mean?" Elon nodded. "Like it's thinking." "Yes," she said, eyes lighting up. "Like it's waiting for you to ask the right question." He looked at her, genuinely intrigued. "And what's the right question?" Ruby didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and opened the driver's side door. The handle extended smoothly, silently. She gestured for him to sit. Elon hesitated only for a beat, then slid in. His hands rested lightly on the steering wheel. His eyes scanned the touchscreen, the center console, the stitching of the seats. It was strange, sitting in his own creation like a guest at someone else's dinner table. Ruby crouched beside the open door. "You don't look like most customers when they sit in that seat." "Oh." They usually lean back, take a selfie, and say something like, "Man, I could get used to this." "But you look like you're listening." Elon chuckled. "Maybe I am." To the car. To the silence. Ruby watched him for a moment, then sat on the edge of the passenger seat, one foot still outside the car. It wasn't protocol, but nothing about this was. She took a slow sip of her own coffee. When I first started working here, I had this idea that I'd climb the ranks, get into R&D, maybe even pitch design ideas someday. But reality doesn't exactly send out engraved invitations. Elon glanced sideways. "Why not?" She shrugged. "I guess because I don't have an engineering degree, or a LinkedIn that screams innovator. I'm just someone who likes to listen to the silence too." For a moment, the hum of the building filled the space between them. Electric but soft, warm even. Elon leaned forward, brushing his fingers along the edge of the screen. "The thing about innovation," he said, "is that it doesn't always start with blueprints. Sometimes it starts with curiosity, or a really good cup of coffee." Ruby smiled. "So you're saying I'm 2 for 2? At least." She looked at him. Not the man from the memes, not the CEO, Just someone trying to remember what it felt like to be human in a place where algorithms and automation ruled the air. "Would you," she began, hesitating only slightly, "ever be interested in talking more? About design, or purpose, or whatever it is that makes this thing," she gestured at the car, "feel like it's alive?" Elon turned his head fully now, his expression unreadable but softer. "I think I'd like that very much." They sat there for a while. No pressure, no marketing scripts. Just two people, feet planted on the floor mats of something that represented the future, quietly exploring what it meant to be present. Outside, the town was waking up. Commuters passed by. Sprinklers clicked on. And somewhere in the distance, a notification buzzed with another meme, another tweet, another voice shouting into the void. But inside that Tesla, parked in the soft morning light, Ruby and Elon didn't hear any of it. They were too busy listening to the silence. The soft hum of the dealership's overhead lighting blended with the morning calm like background music in a contemplative film. The Model S sat in dignified silence, its pristine white body reflecting faint streaks of golden sunlight through the wide windows. Elon and Ruby remained inside, the cabin closed now, cocooned in futuristic quiet. It wasn't a test drive, but it might as well have been for the mind. Elon leaned back slightly in the driver's seat, one hand resting lightly on the wheel, the other cupping his coffee. Ruby sat beside him, notepad closed on her lap, the pretense of a sales pitch already abandoned. He spoke first, his tone easy but precise. "Have you ever thought about the ethical responsibility of range anxiety?" Ruby blinked. "Excuse me." "I mean," he said, tilting his head, "the fact that people fear being stranded says something not just about batteries, but about trust, infrastructure, human conditioning. Don't you think it's kind of existential?" She gave him a long look. "You're asking if battery life is a philosophical issue?" "In a way, yes. We don't question gas stations. They've colonized every corner of the earth. But charging stations? That's a leap of faith. It's not just electricity, it's belief in a system." Ruby couldn't help it. She laughed. "Okay," she said, sipping her coffee. "Now, I know you're not just some guy kicking tires on a Tuesday." Elon smiled. What gave it away? "Most customers ask about cup holders or insurance. You're talking about existential infrastructure collapse." "That's fair." Ruby turned slightly in her seat, her posture more relaxed now, one leg curled under the other. "So what's your angle?" she asked. "Are you a professor? Researcher? Philosophical Uber driver?" Elon smirked. "Something like that." She narrowed her eyes at him, not buying the dodge, but letting it slide. He tapped the touchscreen lightly. "This system, do customers ever ask about how much of their data gets stored?" "Sometimes," she replied. "Mostly the techies. The casual folks just want to know if it connects to Spotify." "Spotify's great," Elon said, "but I think the real killer app is peace and quiet. That's hard to code." Ruby studied him for a second. There was a calmness in the way he spoke. Not laziness, just clarity. Like someone who didn't rush answers because he already lived inside the questions. "So," she said, trying to play along, "what would you change about the car, Mr. Philosopher?" Elon glanced toward the windshield thoughtfully. "I'd build an ambient empathy." Ruby tilted her head. "I'm sorry, what?" "An interface that doesn't just respond to commands, but intuits mood. Picks up on emotional energy. Adjusts lighting, temperature, music, maybe even silence, based on how you're feeling." Ruby raised an eyebrow. "Okay, now we're officially in science fiction territory." "Maybe," he said, smiling. "But so was this car 10 years ago." They sat in silence again, the comfortable kind. Ruby looked out at the parking lot where Elon's Civic sat like an old dog next to the space shuttle. "You're not what I expected," she said. "And what did you expect?" "A guy in a hoodie asking me to knock a few grand off the sticker price. Maybe trying to impress me with crypto." Elon grinned. "I only do that on weekends." Ruby laughed, shaking her head. "You're different." There was something behind her words. Not flirtation. Not exactly. More like the recognition of someone she'd never expected to meet in this setting. She looked at him again. "Can I ask you something weird?" "Please." "What do you really think this car means?" He considered it. "It's a mirror," he said. "We project onto it what we want. Success, sustainability, status, hope, fear. Some people see a machine, some see salvation, and others, they see themselves." Ruby exhaled, smiling at the ridiculous weight of that answer. "And what do you see?" Elon turned to her. "The question is, what do you see?" She looked down, then at the touchscreen, then out the windshield. "I see a tool. A beautiful one, but a tool. And like any tool, it's only as good as the hands that guide it." Elon nodded, impressed. "Now that's an answer." Ruby brushed a curl behind her ear, suddenly self-conscious. "Don't get used to it. I'm mostly sarcastic and fueled by caffeine." Elon chuckled. "Sarcasm is a sign of intelligence. Caffeine too." A beat. She folded her arms. "Okay, but seriously, who are you?" He turned to her, paused, then said, "Let's just say, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the future." "That doesn't narrow it down." "It wasn't supposed to." She rolled her eyes and smiled. "You're impossible. Only when I'm awake." They both laughed. The kind of laugh that comes not from jokes, but from recognizing the absurdity of connection in unexpected places. A quiet moment settled again. Then Ruby said softly, "If more of our customers ask questions like yours, I think the world would change faster." Elon looked at her. Really looked. "Maybe that's why I'm here." And in that line, she felt it, confirmation of everything her instincts had been whispering since day one. He wasn't random. He wasn't average. And whoever he was listening. The atmosphere inside Model S was still thick with thought when the glass doors of the dealership hissed open, breaking the quiet like a splash of cold water. Elon didn't flinch, but Ruby instinctively straightened up in her seat. From a far end of a showroom, a tall man with perfectly parted hair, a stiff jawline, and an expensive watch strode across the floor with purposeful steps. His name tag read Reynolds, general manager, but everyone just called him Ray. He was the kind of man who believed in rules, appearances, and quarterly metrics more than intuition or conversation. And above all, Ray believed in control. His voice came sharp, low, and laced with authority. "Ruby, a moment, please." It wasn't a question. It wasn't even a request. It was a signal. Something was about to shift. Ruby looked at Elon, her eyes apologetic, then carefully stepped out of the car. Elon remained seated, watching through the windshield as she followed Ray toward the back corridor near the employee break room. He didn't follow. He didn't need to. He could already guess what the conversation was going to be. Inside the narrow office space, Ray closed the door behind them with a quiet but deliberate click. Ruby stood still, arms loosely crossed in front of her, trying not to fidget. "What's going on out there?" Ray asked, gesturing vaguely toward the showroom. "I was showing a customer the Model S," she replied. "Inside the vehicle. For over 45 minutes. He had questions." Ray narrowed his eyes. "We are not in the business of long philosophical dialogues, Ruby. We are in the business of sales, volume, efficiency." "He's not a random walk-in, Ray." Ray tilted his head. "Do you know who he is?" Ruby hesitated. "No, not exactly." "Then why are you treating him like he's some kind of special guest?" "Because he listens. Because he asks the kind of questions I wish more people asked. Because he's not trying to negotiate down payments or talk about leather upgrades. He's asking about meaning." Ray leaned against the desk, folding his arms. "You sound like a freshman who just discovered her first TED Talk." Ruby's jaw tightened. Ray continued, tone clipped. "You've been a solid performer, Ruby. One of our best. But this is not what we expect." "What do you expect?" she asked quietly. "I expect you to stop entertaining idle dreamers and get back to qualified leads." He's not buying. He's not serious. And frankly, he's taking up space. Ruby felt something flicker inside her. Disappointment, maybe? Or anger? The kind that builds not from a single moment, but from years of watching people be measured by shallow criteria. And if I disagree, Ray stood straight. Then you'll find yourself reassigned. Or worse, irrelevant. Don't test me, Ruby. This is a business, not a therapy lounge. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. The silence between them was already screaming. Ray opened the door. You're done with him. Understood. Ruby nodded stiffly and walked out before her composure cracked. Elon was still seated in the car, sipping what remained of his now lukewarm coffee. He had watched the interaction unfold like a silent film. He didn't have audio, but he didn't need it. Body language told the whole story. Posture, tension, the quickness of Ruby's steps as she returned. She didn't re-enter the car. She stood outside the open passenger door, arms crossed, eyes down. I'm sorry, she said softly. Elon looked up at her, expression unreadable. For what? I won't be able to keep chatting with you. Manager's orders. There was a pause. He took a slow breath. Because of me. Because I listened to you, she corrected. He nodded once. Slowly. I get it, he said. Some people are threatened by ideas that don't fit the system. Ruby gave a weak smile. He thinks you're wasting my time. Maybe I am. No, you're not. Another pause. Elon stepped out of the car, standing beside her now, in the quiet of the showroom. His voice was calm, but the edge beneath it was unmistakable. People like Ray, he said, forget that innovation starts with questions, not answers. You treated this place like a space for curiosity. That's rare, and it matters more than he realizes. She looked up at him. Why do you talk like that? Like you've been on both sides of the glass? Elon met her eyes. Because I have. Before she could ask anything else, he glanced toward the exit. I should go. Wouldn't want to cost you more than a reprimand. Ruby stepped forward impulsively. Wait. He turned back. I don't know who you really are, she said. But if you ever want to keep talking about cars or meaning or whatever weird philosophy stuff you're into, I'd listen. Off the record. Elon smiled faintly. Maybe I'll take you up on that. He left quietly, hands in his hoodie pocket, head down. Ruby stood beside the gleaming white Model S, staring at the door long after it closed behind him. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this wasn't the end. And Elon, he walked back to his Civic without saying a word, slid into the driver's seat, and sat still for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, opened the Notes app, and typed just one sentence. Ray, remove. The second time Elon Musk stepped through the glass doors of the Tesla dealership, he did so without a hoodie, without sunglasses, and, most notably, without a cap. The morning sunlight caught his face cleanly, revealing features most of the world could recognize even in silhouette, the familiar cheekbones, the unruly streaks of hair brushed carelessly back, the quiet gravity that accompanied him like a personal gravitational field. For the first 5 seconds, no one noticed. Then, a teenager near the charging kiosk dropped his phone. A sales associate paused mid-conversation, blinking hard. Someone in the service bay whispered, "Holy crap, is that?" But Elon didn't look around. He walked casually, hands in his pockets, as if he were still wearing that worn hoodie, still hiding in plain sight. The only difference was the subtle smile tugging at the corner of his lips, a private joke with the universe. Behind the front desk, Ruby was typing something into the terminal. She looked up as the doors chimed and her breath caught, but only for a second. There he was. No disguise, no mask, just Elon. Quiet, composed, eyes scanning the room with a mixture of mischief and absolute calm. Their eyes met. She didn't flinch. She didn't call attention to him. She just smiled, a small, knowing smile. Not the wide-eyed awe of someone meeting a celebrity, but the warm recognition of someone greeting an old friend in a new skin. Elon nodded once. "Morning," he said casually. "Morning," she echoed, voice steady but bright. Then came the voice they both expected. "Mr. Musk." Reynolds, the manager, pale. He emerged from the office like a man stepping onto thin ice. His posture stiffened with every step, his eyes wide with that particular fear reserved for middle managers realizing they might have yelled at the CO 2 days ago. Elon turned slowly, hands still in his pockets. "Ah, Ray." The manager swallowed. I had no idea it was you. I deeply regret if I'd known." "No need," Elon interrupted, voice even. "I'm not here for apologies." "Oh, of course," Reynolds stammered. "You're welcome to tour the facility. Anything you need, I can walk you through." Elon tilted his head. "I actually came back for one simple thing," he said. Ray hesitated. "Anything? I'd like to know if I finally qualify for a test drive." The room froze. A young tech fiddling with an iPad looked up, jaw slack. Ruby pressed her lips together, fighting a smile. Chad, somewhere near the back, holding a clipboard, slowly stepped out of view, pretending to examine a wall socket. Ray chuckled nervously. "Of course. That was all a misunderstanding. Please let me personally arrange it." Elon raised an eyebrow. "Actually, I was hoping Ruby could assist." All eyes turned to her. Ruby blinked once. "It would be my pleasure," she said, stepping around the desk. Reynolds opened his mouth, then shut it again. Elon and Ruby walked side by side toward the cars. As they moved through the dealership, people parted without being asked, silent witnesses to a moment that felt bigger than it should have been. Ruby leaned toward him slightly. "You're really doing this, huh?" "Thought it might be time to clear my name," he replied. "You know, prove I'm worthy." She laughed under her breath. "You just broke 3 people's brains." "I counted 4, he said. They stopped beside a dark gray Model S, sleek, flawless ready. Ruby pulled out the digital key from her pocket, tapped the sensor, and the car came to life with a soft hum. "After you," she said. Elon slipped into the driver's seat like he was returning to a familiar rhythm. Ruby joined him on the passenger side, clipboard now forgotten on the roof behind them. As the doors closed and the noise of the outside world faded, they sat in silence for a beat. "I have to admit," Ruby said, "this is a little surreal." Elon turned to her. "For me too." She looked at him, studying his face now without the filter of shadows or sunglasses. "Why didn't you just announce who you were from the start?" Elon considered it. "Because when people know who you are, they change. They stop being honest. I needed the truth. And did you get it? More than I expected." She leaned back in her seat. "Still want that drive." He started the engine. "I think we both earned it." Outside the glass wall, Ray watched as the Model S rolled slowly out of the showroom and onto the sunlit lot. He stood frozen, the color in his face somewhere between ash and eggshell. Inside the service bay, Chad whispered to no one in particular, "We are so getting audited." But Ruby and Elon were already gone, past the gates down the quiet road, the car gliding forward with perfect symmetry. Neither said much as they cruised through the back roads of Paso Robles. The windows were down. The wind carried the scent of eucalyptus and distant vineyards. It wasn't about proving a point anymore. It was about remembering what it felt like to be the point. Ruby looked out at the rolling hills. "You really planned all this?" Elon shook his head. "I just wanted a test drive." She laughed. "You got something a little bigger than that." He smiled. "Yeah, I got a Navigator." The Model S glided back into the dealership's parking lot, its quiet hum barely announcing its return. As the wheels rolled to a gentle stop beneath the morning sun, Elon didn't immediately open the door. He let his hands rest on the wheel for a moment, his gaze on the horizon, thoughtful. Ruby sat beside him, equally silent, her expression unreadable but calm. Inside, the showroom buzzed with nervous anticipation. Word had spread fast. Elon Musk had not only returned, he'd gone for a drive with Ruby, of all people. Staff members exchanged glances over iPads. Chad had taken up semi-permanent residence behind a ficus plant near the showroom floor. Ray stood near the front desk, posture ramrod straight, rehearsing variations of "Mr. Musk" and "So sorry" under his breath like a tongue twister. When Elon and Ruby finally stepped back inside, the The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Ray was the first to approach, adjusting his collar as though preparing for a diplomatic summit. "Mr. Musk," he began, smile too wide, voice just a shade too loud. "Welcome back. Please allow me to offer my sincerest apologies for the unfortunate misunderstanding earlier this week." Elon looked at him, eyes cool but not unkind. "I appreciate that," he said. Ray pressed forward. "If there's anything you need, anything we can provide. Complimentary services, access to the VIP lounge, test drives of any model, factory customization tours, exclusive features." Elon held up a hand just slightly. It was enough to halt the flood of desperation. "Actually," he said, voice calm, "I'd prefer to be treated like I was yesterday." There was a pause. Ray blinked. "Pardon?" "I'd like the same experience I had when I first walked in," Elon continued, his expression unreadable. "You know, the full treatment. No red carpet, no title, just the policy." Ruby, who had been standing beside Elon, bit her lip. A flicker of laughter threatened to escape, but she kept it under control with the practiced grace of someone who'd sat through years of awkward corporate training videos. Ray flushed slightly. "Sir, I don't think that's necessary." "But I do," Elon said gently but firmly. "Because how we treat people when we think they're nobody, that's the real measure, isn't it?" You could hear the espresso machine hiss from across the building. The silence that followed was sharp, uncomfortable, and deeply satisfying. Ray swallowed. "Of course, if that's what you prefer." Elon turned to Ruby. "Mind giving me the full walkthrough again? The same way we started?" She nodded, this time unable to fully suppress the grin spreading across her face. "Absolutely." Ray stepped back, face tight. Around him, the other employees watched with a mixture of awe and fear, unsure whether to be impressed or terrified. Ruby led Elon toward the same Model S they had sat in just days before. This time, however, the moment carried the weight of poetic symmetry. "So," she said, pulling out the digital key with flair, "welcome to Tesla. Are you ready to experience the future?" Elon smirked. "Only if I'm qualified. I'll be the judge of that." They walked through the same paces as before. Ruby explained the features again, this time with more dramatic flair, deliberately mirroring her previous routine. Elon played along perfectly, feigning ignorance where appropriate, asking the same questions in the same tone. At one point, Ruby even mimicked Chad's earlier line with theatrical grandeur. "Now, Mr. Musk, I should warn you, this vehicle is not for everyone." Elon nearly laughed aloud. "Is it not? It requires vision, imagination, and a tolerance for passive-aggressive management styles." Elon leaned against the driver's door. "That last part might be a deal-breaker." They both laughed now, the sound cutting cleanly through the weight that had been hovering since Ray's apology. As they finished the mock demonstration, Ruby glanced at him seriously. "You didn't have to do that, you know. The whole treat me like yesterday thing." Elon looked out across the showroom, where Ray now stood awkwardly, pretending to read a brochure. "Yes, I did," he said, "because this isn't just about me. It's about the next person who walks in here wearing the wrong shoes, or the single mom, or the guy who's been saving for 10 years. If the standard isn't the same for them, it shouldn't be different for me." Ruby nodded slowly. "I think you just gave me a new reason to love this company. Then it's already worth it." They stood there for a moment in silence, an easier kind of silence this time. Not heavy, just full. Then Elon added, "Besides, I enjoy watching managers sweat." Ruby chuckled. "You have a strange sense of humor." "I've been told." She reached for a nearby clipboard, her voice dropping into character again. "Now then, sir, would you be interested in putting down a deposit today?" Elon grinned. "Can I pay in Dogecoin? I'll check with corporate." As they walked back toward the front of the showroom, Elon turned one last time to Ray, who stood ramrod straight behind the desk. "No hard feelings," Elon said gently. Ray nodded quickly. "Thank you, sir. We've learned a lot." Elon smiled faintly. "Good. Keep learning." With that, he walked out of the dealership, the sun catching his face once again as the glass doors slid shut behind him. Ruby stood watching, not because he was Elon Musk, but because for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was witnessing a company rediscovering its soul, one smile, one irony, one test drive at a time. The keys landed softly in Ruby's palm. Ray handed them over with the same reluctant energy of a child returning a confiscated toy. His jaw was tight, his words clipped. "You may accompany Mr. Musk on the test drive. Just keep it within standard route limits." Elon gave Ray a polite nod, the kind that said thank you and you're dismissed in the same breath. And with that, the two of them, Elon and Ruby, walked out of the showroom, side by side, into the soft light of late morning. The gray Model S sat waiting like a promise, just beginning to be fulfilled. Inside the vehicle, the interior smelled like leather, ozone, and possibility. Elon sat behind the wheel like a pianist preparing to play a private recital, calm, grounded, entirely present. "Ready?" he asked, glancing over at her. Ruby fastened her seatbelt. "Let's make it memorable." The car pulled gently out of a lot, its electric silence wrapping the cabin in serenity. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The road unrolled like silk beneath the tires, flanked by vineyards and golden hills stretching toward a blue California sky. Elon drove smoothly, eyes focused, hands steady. "So," he said finally, "why cars?" Ruby turned toward him slightly, surprised by the directness. "You mean, why do I work here?" "No," he said. "I mean, why did you fall in love with machines that move?" She smiled at that. Not a casual grin, but the kind that comes from remembering something warm and buried. "When I was 9, she began, my dad and I would sit in front of the house and play this game where we'd guess the make and model of every car that drove by. He'd make up stories about the drivers. That guy's late for a date with a dentist. That lady just got a promotion and bought her dream convertible. We'd laugh for hours." Elon nodded, eyes still on the road. "And you got good at it?" "Very," she said. "We weren't rich. We didn't even own a car for a while. But I started sketching designs in the margins of my homework. Engines I didn't understand. Interiors I wanted to sit in. My teachers thought I was daydreaming. Maybe I was. Sounds like you were prototyping." She laughed. "Yeah, well, life got practical. I studied business instead of design. Got this job instead of going to Detroit. Now, I help people by the dreams I used to draw in notebooks." Elon was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you ever still sketch?" "Not in a while," Ruby admitted. "I think I convinced myself that dream belonged to another version of me." "I wouldn't be so sure," he said softly. Ruby looked at him. "You really listen when people talk." "Not many do." Elon shrugged, one hand loosely on the wheel. "Most people wait for their turn to speak. I try to wait for my turn to learn." The road curved gently to the right, and the trees lining the vineyard rows swayed like spectators applauding quietly from the sidelines. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was full, like the ride itself was part of the conversation. "Do you remember your first car?" Ruby asked. 1989 BMW 320i, Elon said without missing a beat. "Bought it with some of my first startup money. No air conditioning. Had to manually kick the door shut. But I loved it." "Why?" "Because it moved me," he said, "and because it was mine." Ruby nodded, her hand resting lightly on the center console. "That's what cars do, right? They move us. Not just physically, but more than that." "Exactly." A beat passed. Then she asked, "Is it weird for you? Being you, I mean. Always having people try to impress you or treat you like a puzzle or a prize." Elon considered that. "It used to bother me," he said. "Now I just notice who treats everyone with equal dignity. That tells me more than any resume." Ruby smiled. "So how did I do?" He looked over at her. "You passed the test before I even stepped into the car." She laughed, trying to brush off the compliment, but her cheeks warmed anyway. As they reached a ridge overlooking the valley, Elon slowed the car and pulled over into a scenic overlook. They stepped out. The air was clean and quiet. Below them, the vineyard sprawled like living green circuitry, winding through the earth in graceful, intentional lines. Ruby leaned against the car and exhaled deeply. "You know," she said, "it's funny. I used to think success looked like an office on the 100th floor, a desk, a title. But this moment right here feels more like it." Elon stood beside her, arms crossed loosely, the breeze tugging at his shirt. "Sometimes," he said, "we build towers trying to get a better view when all we need is a clear road and someone to share it with." She looked at him, surprised again by how unguarded he was. "What's your dream now?" she asked. Elon didn't answer right away. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon. "To help people remember what matters," he said at last, "even if they forget who reminded them." They stood there for a while, just two silhouettes beneath the sky, the world around them silent except for the whisper of wind through vines. Then Ruby said this was more than a test drive. Elon turned to her. "I know." The return to the dealership was quiet, almost reverent. As the Model S pulled gently into the lot, Elon and Ruby sat in a kind of reflective silence. It wasn't awkward. It was the kind of stillness that followed something meaningful, a space where words weren't required because something deeper had already been understood. Ruby looked at the building ahead of them. Same steel and glass, same showroom gloss. But it felt different now. Maybe because she did. "Back to reality," she said softly, unbuckling her seatbelt. "Define reality," Elon replied. She smiled. "Chad. Ray. The espresso machine that makes weird hissing noises when it overheats." "Ah yes. Corporate purgatory." They stepped out of the car together, the doors closing with the familiar thunk that Elon had insisted be acoustically satisfying when the Model S was first engineered. Funny how such a small sound could still carry weight. Inside, the energy had shifted. People had tried to return to normal, but no one really knew what normal was anymore when Elon Musk had just casually test-driven a car with a floor employee and then parked it like he owned the place, which of course he did. Elon walked beside Ruby through the main corridor of the dealership. Ray spotted them from behind a frosted glass partition and gave a tight, awkward nod before ducking back out of sight. Chad, ever the survivalist, was now conveniently stationed in the far back corner, checking tire inventory. Ruby ignored them all. So did Elon. They reached her desk. She sat down, and he leaned against the counter casually, arms folded, face unreadable, but a faint trace of amusement in his eyes. "That was a good drive," he said. Ruby smiled, a little tired but content. "It really was. I've been on press tours through launch pads inside Dragon capsules. But I don't think I've ever had a conversation like that one." She arched an eyebrow. "You mean one that didn't include cameras, microphones, or investment pitches?" "Exactly." There was a pause. Then Elon looked at her, really looked like he was seeing something only now coming into focus. "You're exceptional," he said plainly. Ruby blinked. "What?" "You listen. You think before you speak. You treat people like they matter, even when you don't know who they are. That's rare, especially in an industry that's become obsessed with volume over value." Her face flushed a little. "You don't have to say that." "I know," Elon replied. "That's why it's true." She laughed nervously, tucking a curl behind her ear. "You're not what I expected either, you know." "Oh." She leaned forward. "You seem like someone who would try to change the world with a rocket." Elon hesitated just for a beat. Then he smiled, the kind that started in the corner of his mouth and worked its way up to his eyes. "Maybe I'm trying." Ruby tilted her head. "Are you succeeding?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced toward the window, where the Model S still sat, sunlight glinting off its hood. "I used to think changing the world meant launching something into orbit, or building machines that drive themselves. But now, he looked back at her. "Now, I think maybe it starts with a conversation, a quiet one, in a parked car, with someone who doesn't flinch when you say things like ambient empathy." She laughed. "Well, you're lucky. I'm fluent in technobabble and existential overanalysis." "I knew I liked you." There was a beat of silence, then Ruby asked, What was it really like? Launching something into space. Elon paused, his gaze distant for a second. It's like holding your breath for 17 years and finally exhaling. It's terrifying and beautiful. It's watching fire carry your hopes and math into the sky and praying it all holds together. But it never feels like enough. Why not? Because there's always another launch, another goal, another impossible thing to attempt. She nodded slowly. And what would be enough? Elon met her eyes. Maybe this. Ruby blinked. This. A day without fanfare. A real conversation. A reminder that humanity isn't something we build into machines, but something we remember to keep in ourselves. She didn't respond. Not because she didn't have words, but because she didn't want to interrupt the truth hanging between them. Then, with a soft smile, she said, "You ever think about writing code again? Not for systems. For people." "You mean poetry?" "I mean clarity. You speak like someone who used to write code but switched to philosophy when he realized syntax couldn't explain the human heart." Elon laughed. "That's the most flattering insult I've ever received." Ruby chuckled. It wasn't an insult. It was a bug report. Their laughter softened the space around them, dissolving the last remnants of formality. No cameras, no press, just two people surrounded by cars, sharing something real. As the moment stretched, a small chime rang from her workstation, an email alert. She glanced at the screen, eyebrows raising slightly. "Looks like corporate just pushed through a sudden policy update." "Oh," she read aloud. "All dealerships to review employee interaction protocols and submit feedback on customer experience. Effective immediately." Elon grinned. That was fast. Ruby gave him a sideways glance. "You didn't." "I may have." She shook her head, amused. "You're impossible. And you're underestimating how fun impossible can be." He pushed off the desk, standing straight again. "I should go," he said, "but this isn't the end." "I didn't think it was," she replied. As he turned to leave, she added, "By the way, the Model S? It suits you." He looked over his shoulder. Yeah, she said, but the Civic told the better story." Elon smiled. "Then maybe that's the one I'll keep." And with that, he walked out into sunlight again. No hoodie, no disguise, no need. Just Elon. The internet, like the universe, never forgets, only waits for a punchline. It was nearly 10 a.m. the next day when Eric Monroe, a mid-level marketing consultant from Santa Barbara, decided to clean out his old phone gallery. He had just dropped his Tesla Model 3 off at the Paso Robles dealership for software calibration, and with half an hour to kill, he sat in the customer lounge scrolling through hundreds of forgotten images, brunches, beach sunsets, screenshots of QR codes from last year's Comic-Con. Then he saw it. A blurry selfie from 2 years ago. He and a man in a gray hoodie, half-shadowed under a cafe awning in Venice Beach. The caption: "Met some guy who sounded exactly like Elon Musk. Said his name was Eli or something. Weird dude. Smart though." Eric chuckled at his own sarcasm. But something about the image pulled at him this time. The profile, the expression, that subtle Elon smirk that had become a meme of its own. He stared harder, then opened the viral Tesla dealership video from earlier that week, still trending on Reddit under the painfully clickbait title, "Old dude tries to test drive a Tesla. Gets shut down hard. LMAO." And suddenly it clicked. Same jawline, same build, same calm posture, same guy. "Oh my God," Eric whispered, sitting straight up in a lounge. A few seats away, another customer looked over suspiciously, but Eric didn't notice. His fingers were already flying across the screen. He posted the image to Twitter, X rather, with the caption, "Wait a second. This was the guy in the viral Tesla rejection video. That's literally Elon Musk. I met him. He was totally in disguise. Face with tears of joy, face with tears of joy, hashtag Tesla, hashtag plot twist." By noon, the post had 30,000 retweets. By 3 p.m., major media outlets were reposting the side-by-side comparison, the Venice Beach Cafe selfie, and the dealership surveillance still. Underneath, headlines screamed with increasingly absurd energy. Elon Incognito, billionaire CEO allegedly rejected at own dealership while in disguise. The hooded mogul, Elon Musk gray hoodie, and the most iconic Tesla moment of the year. Elon Musk confirmed, man in viral video, is the Tesla founder. And we all laughed. The internet did what it does best. It spiraled into analysis. TikTok creators re-edited the original clip with dramatic movie soundtracks. One layered in the mission, impossible theme, and dubbed Elon's calm exit from the dealership as the greatest corporate undercover moment of all time. Others got more philosophical. A popular philosophy YouTuber stitched the video with commentary. What does it mean when a billionaire CEO has to pretend to be ordinary to find out how the ordinary are treated? Reddit threads exploded with speculation. One user wrote, "This is basically a real-life Batman move. Billionaire walks among us, gets rejected by his own system, and takes notes." Another added, "And he came back like a boss." Honestly, this is peak Musk. Back at the dealership, the storm hit like a digital tsunami. Ray nearly fainted when CNN called asking for a statement. Chad went on personal leave. Ruby, seated behind her desk with a tea she hadn't touched, stared at her phone in disbelief. The selfie, the hashtags, the reposts. Her name wasn't mentioned yet, but she knew it was only a matter of time. A few online sleuths were already dissecting dealership footage frame by frame, trying to identify the woman who treated him like a human. She felt exposed. Then she felt proud, because she had never done any of it for recognition. She had simply listened, treated someone with interest instead of suspicion, with kindness instead of calculation. A notification buzzed. She glanced at it. Unknown number. Seems the disguise didn't hold. But the point did. She blinked, then smiled. "Ruby, told you the Civic would give you away." "Elon, next time I'll borrow a minivan." She stared at the screen for a while, her heart beating faster than she cared to admit. There was humor there, but something deeper beneath it. A sense of continuity, like the story wasn't over yet. By evening, Tesla's official channels had weighed in. A post appeared on X from the @Tesla account. Confirmed, yes, that was Elon. No, he didn't get the test drive the first time. Yes, we're updating our training programs. Hashtag empathy is electric high voltage. The post went viral too. Memes followed. So did t-shirts. Front, do I qualify for a test drive? Back, Elon didn't. At first. The whole thing took on a mythic quality. A parable wrapped in internet chaos. A reminder that status meant nothing when the person checking your worth didn't look past the surface. Ruby's favorite moment came late that night. She received another message. "Elon, that coffee you gave me? Still better than the media buzz." Ruby, the coffee or the conversation? Elon, both, but mostly the part where you didn't flinch. She stared at that reply. Didn't flinch. No one had ever described her that way before. She didn't quite know why it hit her so hard. Maybe because it was true. The world saw Elon Musk now in that viral video and gasped at the twist. But she saw him even before the reveal. She heard the weight behind his questions. She saw the mind behind the hoodie. And he had seen her too. Not just as an employee or a curious conversationalist, but as someone who mattered. And in a digital age flooded with noise, that maybe was the loudest message of all. The email arrived at 6:07 a.m. on a Friday. Subject line: urgent, internal directive, do not ignore. Every Tesla dealership manager in the Western region received it at once. A single-page PDF, stamped with the unmistakable sharp red Tesla logo and signed off by the West Coast Regional Director. It was not just a memo. It was a bomb. It began with sterile corporate language. Following a recent series of high-visibility incidents, this directive serves as immediate guidance on revisions to employee-customer interaction protocols and leadership conduct expectations. But the further down you read, the clearer the message became. All management-level staff are reminded that empathy and equality take precedence over performance-based profiling. Any deviation will be subject to suspension pending review. It was clear. It was stern. It was unlike anything the dealership had ever seen. And for Ray, it landed like a lightning strike. He opened the email in his small office, alone, sipping lukewarm coffee from his personalized team lead of the quarter mug. He read the memo 3 times. Then, without speaking, he opened his calendar, saw the sudden meeting invite titled Regional Conduct Review, Immediate Attendance Required, and knew. He was done. By 9 a.m., his desk was cleared. By 9:15, the assistant regional manager was sitting in his place. Ray didn't fight it, didn't even raise his voice. He simply nodded, signed the papers, and walked out without looking back. Across the showroom, no one spoke about it, but everyone felt it, like the final shift of tectonic plates after weeks of rumbling tension. At 10:22 a.m., a new email hit inboxes, addressed dealership-wide. Subject: Internal Announcement, Staff Development Update. Effective immediately, Ruby Alvarez is promoted to Customer Experience Lead with extended regional mentorship responsibilities. Please join us in congratulating her for her outstanding professionalism, integrity, and leadership under pressure. Ruby read the message 3 times. Then she stared at her name on the screen. It wasn't the title that moved her. It was the validation behind it. The quiet confirmation that who she was and how she treated people was not just seen, but valued. She looked around the office, stunned. No applause, no balloons, no speeches. But few colleagues clapped quietly. One gave her a nod of respect. And when she stood up, she did so not to claim anything, but simply to breathe. Outside, the Paso Robles sunlight painted gold across the Tesla logo above the doors. Elon hadn't returned, not yet. But she could feel his presence like a ripple still echoing through the place. The Civic was gone, the meme storm had calmed, but the aftermath had brought something rare: change. A few minutes later, she was called into the conference room. Inside, 2 regional supervisors waited, one from HR, the other from training and culture. Both were professional, warm, and unusually humble. "We just want to hear from you," one of them said, "about what happened and how you handled it." Ruby wasn't used to that, being asked how she handled something. Most of her life had been about handling things silently. But she spoke. She told them everything, from the moment the man in the hoodie walked in, to the morning he returned with no disguise, to the moment she realized that empathy might be the most valuable innovation a company could invest in. She told them about how she used to dream of designing cars, not for speed, but for feeling. How she'd wanted people to sit inside something that made them remember something instead of forget everything. They listened. When she finished, one of them said, "Do you know what Elon told us in his debrief?" Ruby blinked. "He gave a debrief." "Of sorts," the woman from HR said with a soft smile. "He said, find the people who didn't flinch." Ruby's chest tightened. "Do you know how rare that is?" The other one added, "To treat someone the same whether they're a stranger or a CEO." "I wasn't trying to impress anyone," Ruby said quietly. "Exactly," the woman replied. "That's why you did." They offered her not just a promotion, but a seat at the table. A chance to work on the upcoming redesign of customer experience strategies. She wouldn't just represent Paso Robles. She would represent what happens when empathy outperforms policy. Later that day, Ruby walked out into the sun, letting the warmth wash over her. The same Civic-sized parking spot was empty again, but something inside her had shifted. Her phone buzzed. "Elon, heard the news. I'd offer you a ride to celebrate, but I have a feeling you're the one in the driver's seat now." She grinned. "Ruby, I still have questions about ambient empathy." "Elon, then I guess I'll be back soon." She paused, then added, "Ruby, bring coffee. Mine's gone cold." "Elon, on my way." She slipped the phone back into her pocket, heart beating with something new. Not adrenaline, not shock, clarity. Ruby had always thought her dreams were parked somewhere far off, in Detroit or Palo Alto, or buried under corporate glass ceilings. But maybe, just maybe, the real design work started here. Not on drafting tables, but in how people are treated when no one thinks they matter. And maybe changing the world didn't always require a rocket. Sometimes it just took listening to the right voice at the right time. It wasn't scheduled, it wasn't scripted, and it wasn't part of any corporate strategy. But that's exactly why it worked. 2 days after Ruby's quiet promotion and Ray's swift removal, the internet was still humming with speculation. Headlines flickered across homepages, late-night shows made monologues out of the incident, and LinkedIn feeds turned the ordeal into think pieces with titles like "Leadership Lessons from a Test Drive Gone Wrong," "The CEO in the Hoodie," "What Elon Musk Taught Us About Empathy." But Elon had remained quiet. No statements, no press conferences, no victory laps, until suddenly he posted a single word on X, formerly Twitter: "Live." The reply count exploded in under a minute. A few minutes later, he went live on X Spaces. No camera, just voice, just Elon. The title of the room? Tesla Test Drives and the Disguise That Worked Too Well. Within 10 minutes, the audience swelled past 1.3 million listeners. Ruby tuned in too, from her kitchen. She sat barefoot on the tile floor, back resting against a cabinet, cup of mint tea in her hands, as the unmistakable cadence of Elon's voice filled the space. "Hi everyone," he began, sounding like someone testing a mic that didn't need testing. "No big announcements tonight. I just wanted to talk. No PR. Just a guy with a Civic and a curiosity problem." That made people laugh. "And listen," he continued, slowly, deliberately. "A few weeks ago, I walked into one of my own stores. Disguised. Hoodie, hat, old car, and I asked for a test drive." A pause. They said no. Even through audio, you could hear the smirk in his voice. But this isn't about calling anyone out. It's about calling something forward. "I didn't do it to trap anyone. I did it because I genuinely wanted to know, how do we treat people who don't look impressive, who don't sound important, who don't feel like a sale the moment they walk through the door?" Ruby felt her throat tighten. The world listened as Elon paused again, letting the silence breathe. "We design machines to be more efficient every year," he said. "But how often do we redesign the human experience?" The chat exploded with reactions. "Fire, fire, fire," Elon preaching. "Bars. Is this going to be a t-shirt?" He continued. "I wasn't offended when they turned me away. I was fascinated, because it told me we still have a blind spot. Not in our code, in our culture." Then came the line that would echo across headlines, boardrooms, and dorm room walls by morning. "I let myself be rejected to understand how we treat those no one recognizes." Ruby sat up straighter. She whispered the words aloud, almost in disbelief. On screen, the line was already being quoted by journalists, clipped by influencers, plastered in bold letters across motivational content. "Recognition is a currency," Elon went on, "but empathy is infrastructure." He told the story of the rejection without naming names. Then the return. The moment Ruby offered coffee instead of judgment. The test drive. The laughter. The quiet wisdom exchanged beneath a simple roof of glass and steel. He didn't glorify it. He simply told it. And in doing so, he reframed it. "This isn't about me," he said near the end. "This is about what happens when the person behind the desk listens, when someone decides that kindness isn't a cost, it's a feature." Ruby's eyes welled. She wiped them quickly, grateful there was no video feed. Then came the final words of the stream. "I don't need to be recognized. I need the people we serve to be seen." The space ended, just like that, and the world went wild. Within an hour, every major outlet was quoting the same line. "I let myself be rejected to understand how we treat those no one recognizes." It was on CNN, BBC, Bloomberg, and the front page of The Guardian. Time magazine reposted the quote with the caption, "Modern leadership in a single sentence." Tesla's official account posted a simple graphic with white text over a black screen. "Empathy is infrastructure." Elon Musk. Tens of thousands reposted it. And yet, amid the avalanche of digital noise, Ruby's phone stayed quiet. No calls, no sudden spotlight, just a single message. "Elon, hope that wasn't too much." She smiled, her fingers moving slowly across the screen. "Ruby, it was just enough." A second later, he replied, "Elon, more to come." She didn't know what that meant yet, but she believed it. Because sometimes the biggest revolutions don't come with noise. Sometimes they begin with silence, kindness, and the courage to ask, what if we saw people before we sold to them? And now the world had seen. The next morning arrived quietly. The world was still buzzing with headlines, reposts, stitched videos, and essays quoting Elon's words from the night before. News outlets called it the most important statement of 21st century leadership. Think tanks were dissecting it in threads. Even rival CEOs had commented, some with awe, others with thinly veiled sarcasm. But Ruby? Ruby had already silenced her notifications. She wasn't running from it, she just needed space to breathe. After months of routine, something inside her felt new and delicate, like walking through her own life with shoes made of glass. Every movement was more vivid. Every gesture meant something. And yet, she still showed up to work. No fanfare, no red carpet, just Ruby, her maroon polo tucked in perfectly, her curls pulled back with quiet determination. She clocked in like always, said good morning like always. But something had changed in the air. Co-workers nodded with respect that hadn't been there a week ago. Customers looked at her twice, sometimes with curiosity, sometimes with quiet admiration. The phrase, "the woman who didn't flinch," had begun to circle, whispered between departments and Reddit posts alike. Around midday, her desk phone rang. Not her cell, not the intercom, her landline. She picked it up. Ruby speaking. A familiar voice answered. Calm, steady, measured. "Hey, got a minute?" She sat up straighter. "Of course. It's Elon." A pause. She smiled instinctively. "I figured." He laughed softly on the other end. "Wanted to ask you something. Actually wanted to invite you." "Invite me?" "To the Tesla headquarters in Palo Alto. Nothing formal, just a visit. There's a place here I think you'd like to see." Ruby hesitated. Her heart began to beat faster. "Why?" "Because I think there's a place here where you can do more than sell cars," he said. "Somewhere your questions could shape things, not just explain them." Her breath caught. For a moment, she couldn't speak. "Ruby," he prompted. She cleared her throat. "Sorry, I'm still trying to believe this is real." "I get that," Elon said. "But some things are real before we recognize them." She let the words land. Let them take root. "What would I be doing?" she asked carefully. "We don't have a title yet. But I'm thinking something between experience architect and empathy engineer," he teased. She laughed through sudden tears. "That sounds fake." So did rockets to Mars. Ruby covered her mouth, trying not to sob into the receiver. Her entire life, her sketches in old notebooks, her father's whispered encouragements, her days behind this desk watching the world hurry past, all of it suddenly aligned. Not in fame, not in fortune, but in purpose. "I'd like that," she said, her voice cracking despite her best efforts. "I'd like that a lot." There was a beat of silence on the other end. Not awkward, just full. "I'll have someone book your flight," Elon said. "You could have sent an email," she replied, trying to play it cool. "I don't send emails for things that matter," he answered. Another pause. "Bring your sketches," he added. "I have a feeling the world hasn't seen your best ideas yet." And with that, the line went quiet. Ruby set the phone down slowly. The tears came without apology. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, like rain finally allowed to fall. A co-worker passed by, pausing slightly. "Hey, you okay?" Ruby wiped her cheeks and smiled. "Yeah, better than okay." "Someone finally treat you right?" She nodded, her voice soft. "Someone finally saw me." That evening, she went home, pulled out the old spiral-bound sketch pad she hadn't touched in years, and open to the first page. There it was, a pencil drawing of a car, not a Tesla, not anything that ever existed, just a dream on wheels. It had curved lines, sharp intuition, and a handwritten caption above it. What if machines could listen? Ruby traced her finger over the line. Now someone had listened back. And soon, she'd go where voices turned into blueprints, where empathy wasn't a soft skill. It was a strategy, a compass, and it had pointed straight to her. Palo Alto was warmer than Ruby expected, not just in climate, but in energy. The Tesla headquarters didn't feel like company. It felt like a living experiment, an organism made of glass and algorithms, ideas and unfinished sentences. Employees didn't walk, they glided. Conversations echoed through minimalist hallways with phrases like decentralized cognition and emotional UX metrics. And then there was the door. It wasn't marked. It didn't need to be. It opened not with a badge, but with a fingerprint, hers. "Welcome to Nova Lab," said the voice beside her. Elon stood just behind, dressed as casually as ever, black t-shirt, charcoal jeans, hair tousled like he'd been writing code or theories or both. Ruby blinked. "Nova." He nodded. "It means new. Not just in name, in nature." They stepped into the room. It didn't look like a lab. No sterile white surfaces. No blinking machinery. It looked like an artist's studio collided with a meditation space. Soft lighting, interactive touch panels, a long, transparent table with dozens of paper sketches and 3D printed miniatures. In one corner, there was a Tesla seat, just the seat, surrounded by sound panels and plants. "This is the design incubator," Elon explained. "We use it to explore things that don't have metrics yet." "Like what?" He gestured toward the table. "Like the experience before the experience." Ruby raised an eyebrow. "Everyone talks about product," he continued. "Specs, speed, power. But before a person ever touches a car, they walk into a space. They meet someone. They feel something. That's what I want you to design." Ruby blinked. "The feeling." He smiled. "Exactly." For a moment, she said nothing. Her eyes scanned the room again. A wall of rotating mood boards. A low sofa made from recycled textiles. 2 blank tablets, labeled Engage and Listen, in clean typography. "This isn't just a showroom," Ruby said quietly. "It's a conversation." "That's what I want you to lead," Elon replied. "Not the mechanics, the humanity." She turned to him, her heart racing in that strange, soft way that didn't feel like nerves, it felt like purpose. "And you think I can do that?" He looked at her, without pretense, without branding. "I think you've already been doing it." The first day was chaos in the best way. Ruby didn't sit behind a desk. She sat on the floor barefoot, surrounded by colored paper, touch-screen interfaces, and 3 interns who hadn't yet figured out if she was their manager or a visiting visionary. One of them, a soft-spoken UX designer named Layla, brought her tea without asking. Another started sketching when Ruby explained how eye contact changes the energy in a room. They weren't designing cars. They were designing presence. Ruby proposed something radical, a touchpoint system that replaced scripted greetings with adaptive emotional cues. Instead of saying, "Can I help you?" sales reps would be trained to read posture, tone, emotion. They'd learn when to offer information and when to simply offer silence, when to lead and when to let the customer lead. The team titled it the Pause Protocol. It wasn't flashy. It was revolutionary. On day 3, Ruby added a second layer, a universal accessibility station, a space in every Tesla location where nonverbal, multilingual, or neurodivergent customers could engage through visuals, gestures, or tactile input. No forms, no pressure, just ease. Layla asked, "What's this called?" Ruby thought for a moment, then smiled. The human lane. By the end of the first week, the whiteboards were filled with strange, beautiful diagrams that looked less like schematics and more like empathy maps. There were circles instead of charts, color instead of code, curves instead of corners. Elon visited often, but only to listen. He sat quietly in the corner of the room with a tablet, occasionally nodding, occasionally smiling. Once, he caught Ruby's eye after she explained a mock showroom flow. "You're not designing a space," he said. "You're designing a state." She laughed. "I'm just trying to make people feel safe." That's a state most people don't even know they're missing. That evening, Ruby sat alone in the Nova lab. The lights dimmed automatically. Outside, the city glowed. Palo Alto moved like it always had, efficient, brilliant, fast. But inside this room, the world was finally moving with her. She looked at the interface she'd helped program. It displayed a welcome screen, not with buttons, but with questions. What brings you in today? Would you like to talk or just look? How you want to feel when you leave? She ran her fingers across the glass. Then she opened her sketchbook again, the same one Elon had asked her to bring. She flipped to a blank page. At the top, she wrote, "Designing for dignity." Then she began to draw. Not a vehicle, not a screen, but a room. A shape. A feeling. A moment where a person walks in and doesn't feel judged. Where they are seen without needing to explain themselves. Where buying a car feels less like a transaction and more like coming home. The stage was minimalist. No fireworks. No lasers. No dramatic voiceovers. Just one clean white platform under soft overhead lights. Behind it, a curved LED wall shimmered in warm gradient tones. No logos, no slogans, only the words. Tesla Human Experience Launch, Redwood Theater, Palo Alto. A crowd of 200 invited guests sat quietly, awaiting what had only been described as a redefinition of connection. Among the audience were engineers, artists, executives, customers, critics, and a few curious interns who had begged their way in. Backstage, Elon Musk stood off to the side, arms folded, wearing a black blazer over a t-shirt. He wasn't there to speak. Not this time. This time, the spotlight belonged to someone else. As the lights dimmed, a single silhouette walked on stage. Ruby Alvarez, wearing a dark slate blouse and slacks, her curly hair in a soft updo, she stepped forward with calm grace. No teleprompter, no notes, just her, and a quiet confidence that had been years in the making. She paused, looked out at the audience, and smiled. "When I started at Tesla," she began, "I didn't know I was walking into a lab. I thought I was walking into a job. But it turns out, this place doesn't just build machines. It builds mirrors." She paused again, letting the words land. "What we're launching today isn't a new vehicle. It's not an update or a model refresh. It's something much harder to prototype, much harder to measure." She clicked a remote. Behind her, the screen shifted to a looping video, slow, elegant footage of people entering Tesla spaces. Smiles, eye contact, kindness. Each frame accompanied by a single caption. "Seen, heard, respected. We call it Project ON," Ruby continued. "It stands for Adaptive Empathy Operational Network. But what it really means is a new kind of welcome." She walked slowly across the stage. It started with a question. What if the first thing we optimized wasn't speed, but sincerity? The video transitioned to show the human lane concept, inclusive consultation pods, accessibility-first design, and ambient light zones that adjusted based on customer stress levels. There were audible murmurs of awe. "In every Tesla store across North America," Ruby said, "we'll be launching redesigned experience centers based not on hierarchy or sales metrics, but emotional resonance. No scripts, no pressure, just human-first design, guided by presence." Applause began to rise. She held up a hand, soft and open. "And one more thing." The screen behind her changed again, this time revealing a side-by-side image. On the left, the viral still of the gray hoodie man being politely rejected at a dealership. On the right, the now famous quote in bold, "I let myself be rejected to understand how we treat those no one recognizes." The crowd broke into full applause, but Ruby didn't flinch. She simply nodded. Empathy isn't a product, it's a choice, and we're making it every day. As the crowd rose to its feet, Elon stood quietly backstage, one hand over his heart, the other clapping softly. He didn't step out. He didn't wave. He just watched. And he smiled. 3 months later, Paso Robles, California. The Tesla showroom was different now. Gone were the high counters, the stiff protocols. In their place were open spaces, soft lighting, and a new, human lane kiosk glowing gently beside the main entrance. Customers now lingered longer, not because of the cars, but because of the kindness. And behind the front desk stood a man in a neat maroon Tesla Polo, slightly older than the others, his name tag polished and centered. Reynolds, reception/trainee, learning every day. He greeted guests with a polite smile, offered water bottles without hesitation, and directed them to consultation pods with calm precision. He no longer barked. He no longer postured. He simply listened. If you looked closely, you might catch him watching the door now and then, as if expecting someone to walk through it wearing a hoodie and a quiet challenge. But no one came. Not yet. At least not in disguise. Meanwhile, in Palo Alto, Ruby was drawing again. Her new desk wasn't in an office. It was in a light-filled open studio overlooking a row of olive trees. Her title wasn't manager or director. It was something she chose herself. Head of human-centered experience. Her notebook was nearly full now. On the final page, she wrote, "Dignity is not a luxury. It's a system feature." As she closed the book, her phone buzzed. A simple message from Elon. "You're up next at the Berlin lab. Ready to teach them how to listen?" Ruby smiled. Always. And somewhere across the globe, someone was walking into a Tesla store, tired, unseen, uncertain. But this time, they were welcomed, not because they were important, but because they were human. And that finally was enough. Now we want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, which city are you watching from? And let us know, what would you have done if you were in Ruby's place or Elon's? Your story matters. And who knows, maybe you're the next person who'll surprise the world in the quietest way.